Welcome to a world where paper rests and so does the nation. Let the slow, gentle rhythm of early American life guide you into deep, peaceful sleep. If you enjoy these calming journeys through history, subscribe for more quiet stories and let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. There was a time in early America when the country itself seemed smaller, quieter, and more deliberate than it does now. In towns and villages scattered along rivers and forests, the pulse of life was measured not in the rush of modern communication, but in the careful movements of ink across paper. Ledgers, journals, and letters were the threads that held the growing nation together, stitching together lives, commerce, and governance with patience and precision. In these early years, a town's clerk or scribe held a quiet sort of power. They were the keepers of records, the silent witnesses to births, deaths, marriages, land sales, and debts. They did not raise their voices in debate or shout their authority from public squares. Instead, they wrote, and in their writing, the world unfolded. Each letter formed, each number tallied, each page turned, shaped the way people understood the order of their days. Imagine a small town in New England, dusted in morning frost, the roofs of the houses glinting pale in the dawn light. A solitary figure walks along the dirt road to the town hall. This is the clerk. In his satchel, he carries parchment, quills, and ink, tools heavier than one might expect, but essential. Inside, the town records are waiting. Property deeds for families who have lived in the same house for generations, tax rolls to keep the community solvent, letters from relatives in other colonies, and occasional notices from the distant government in Philadelphia. Each document is a quiet declaration of someone's life, carefully stored and preserved. People trusted these records more than spoken words. In a world without telephones, radio, or newspapers delivered daily, a handwritten note could travel far and carry weight beyond imagination. A farmer in Pennsylvania might write to a cousin in Virginia about a horse for sale, or a newborn in the family. The cousin would wait days, perhaps weeks, for a reply, each day stretching the news thinner and slower across the map. Waiting was not a problem. It was a rhythm of life, a kind of quiet expectation that allowed people to dwell in each moment, however ordinary it might seem. Ledgers were more than lists. They were the pulse of the town, recording human interaction with patience that modern eyes might mistake for dullness. When a merchant sold flour or a blacksmith charged for horseshoes, it went into a book. The ledger was precise, neat, and consistent, often written in a hand so careful that it resembled a work of art. Pages bore the weight of daily existence, yet they carried a certain poetry, the repetition of numbers and names, the gentle curves of letters in careful script, the subtle smudge of ink from a hurried hand. In every entry there was patience, and in patience a quiet understanding of human life. Not all paperwork was official. Private journals existed alongside ledgers, sometimes tucked into drawers or hidden in attics. Here, one might find confessions, reflections, or stories of journeys across rivers and forests. An early American traveling by foot or by horse often kept a log of his route, noting the weather, the condition of the roads, or the animals he saw. A young woman in Massachusetts might write to herself about the day's chores, her thoughts wandering into dreams she dared not speak aloud. These private records were less formal but equally vital, capturing the subtle textures of ordinary life in a world that was just learning to understand itself. Communication between towns relied on postwriters who rode carefully along rough paths, sometimes braving rain, snow, or the threat of wild animals. Each letter they carried was more than a message. It was a lifeline. Families could only know what was happening elsewhere through these handwritten notes, which, unlike modern technology, could not be instantly corrected or deleted. Errors were part of the record, smudges and misspellings becoming permanent marks of human fallibility, yet they also made the world feel alive and intimate. Early American communities valued consistency. Town meetings often began with a reading of the records, reviewing what had happened in the past weeks or months. Decisions were made slowly, deliberately, and with a sense of continuity. The ledger was more than bookkeeping. It was a way to connect present actions with the past, ensuring that nothing important was lost. It was a rhythm of accountability, a methodical unfolding of life, one written word at a time. In many ways, these records were a form of storytelling. A birth recorded in a ledger was not merely a fact, it was a beginning of a narrative. A property transfer was not just a transaction, it was a story of ambition, inheritance, or survival. The quiet act of writing carried the weight of human experience, transforming ordinary events into something enduring. Future generations would leaf through these pages, discovering patterns and connections that were invisible to those who lived them. There is a charm in the slowness of this world. Today, we are used to instant news, messages that travel faster than the sun can cross the sky, and information that is forgotten almost as soon as it is received. But in early America, every note, every entry, every ledger line demanded attention, reflection, and care. The world moved at the pace of ink drying on paper, and in that pace, there was a certain calmness, a quiet understanding that life, in all its complexity, required patience. Even disputes were handled with care. A disagreement over land might involve weeks of correspondence, careful examination of prior records, and the mediation of trusted neighbors. Decisions were not immediate, nor were they final until every detail was recorded. In this methodical deliberation, one could see a culture slowly building itself, one that prized thoughtfulness, transparency, and the enduring power of the written word. By the late 18th century, America was still young, but it was anchored in its records. Each ledger and letter contributed to a vast network of knowledge and memory, shaping communities, commerce, and governance. The country's story was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, written not in newspapers or broadcasts, but in the careful, deliberate act of handwriting. To imagine this world is to slow down. Picture yourself in a small office, the scent of ink and parchment filling the air. Outside, the sun rises over a town slowly coming to life. A quill scratches across paper. Names, dates, and numbers form a pattern that will last long after the writer is gone. Each line is a quiet testament to ordinary lives, a record of human effort, patience, and care. In this way, early America was less about dramatic events and more about the subtle accumulation of daily acts, a nation built on the quiet diligence of ink on paper. It is easy to overlook these details today, yet without them, much of what we know about early America would be lost. The ledgers and letters preserved a nation's memory, allowed families to navigate life's uncertainties, and provided a framework for communities to thrive. They were humble, slow, and deliberate, but they were essential. In their silence, they spoke volumes about the rhythm of life, the importance of record, and the enduring human need to make sense of the world, one written word at a time. And so, early America was not always loud or hurried. It was a nation of letters, ledgers, and ink, a land where patience was the natural law, and time itself moved along with the scratching of quills. In this quiet diligence, the foundations of a new country were built, one page, one record, and one careful word at a time. How slow evenings, limited light, and written routines shaped natural sleep rhythms. Long before electric bulbs glowed in every room and screens kept people awake well past midnight, time in early America moved differently. Evenings were measured not by clocks or alarms, but by the gradual fading of light and the quiet burn of a candle or oil lamp. The day slowed as the sun dipped behind hills or trees, and people prepared themselves, in small, deliberate ways, for the hours of darkness that would follow. In its typical colonial home, the rhythm of the day was dictated by natural light. Families rose with the sun, their mornings filled with chores, work in the fields, and domestic routines. Meals were planned around the daylight, for there was little use in cooking or laboring once darkness fell. Candles were reserved for brief periods, lit sparingly to stretch the evening, often just long enough to write a letter, read scripture, or mend clothes. By necessity, life moved slowly as the day waned, and in this slow pacing, sleep became a natural companion. Imagine a small farmhouse in rural Massachusetts. The wooden floorboards creak softly under bare feet. Outside, the last rays of the sun drift across the fields, touching the tips of tall grasses with gold. Inside, a mother gathers her children around a simple wooden table. She lights a single candle, careful to shield it from drafts, and begins to read aloud from a well-worn book. The children sit quietly, listening to the words, the soft flicker of the flame casting gentle shadows on the walls. This candlelight is more than illumination. It is a marker of time itself, signaling the approach of rest. Evening routines were central to life. Before bed, people washed, wrote letters, checked on animals, and tended fires. Each action was deliberate, carefully performed, and slow. There were no blaring notifications or electric distractions, no modern insistence to extend the day beyond its natural limits. Time itself seemed to stretch, measured in tasks and quiet reflection rather than minutes and seconds. These routines were not just practical, they were soothing, signaling the mind and body that the day was ending and that rest was near. Candlelight itself shaped experience. Its soft, uneven glow created a world that was intimate and gentle. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like silent companions. Activities slowed in response to this light. Thoughts became calmer, and conversations softened. People read by candlelight not in haste, but with attention, savoring each word. Letters written during these hours often carried a reflective tone, full of careful consideration. It was a time to think, to remember, and to prepare for the night ahead. Sleep in this era was not rushed or regimented by clocks alone. Natural cycles of light and darkness guided the body. People often followed a biphasic sleep pattern, which meant they might rest for a first period shortly after sunset, wake for an hour or two during the night to tend a fire, pray, or reflect, and then return to sleep until morning. This rhythm was in harmony with the environment, shaped by darkness and quiet, and supported by the predictability of evening routines. In towns and villages, public life also slowed as evening approached. Street lamps, where they existed, were few and dim, and streets were quiet. Shops closed, workshops emptied, and the day's labor was done. Families gathered around tables, lit candles or lanterns, and shared food and conversation. The world outside seemed to retreat, leaving a cocoon of warmth and safety indoors. Nightfall was not a disruption, but a natural progression, a time for reflection and rest. Writing and record-keeping were often evening activities, conducted under the soft glow of candlelight. Merchants, farmers, and clerks recorded the day's transactions, notes, or observations. Letters were composed, sometimes taking hours to perfect, each stroke of the quill deliberate. The slow pace of writing under such light encouraged thoughtfulness. Mistakes were corrected carefully, ink allowed to dry fully, and each entry became a small meditation. In this environment, the mind unwound, mirroring the gentle slowing of daylight, preparing naturally for sleep. Even for those who did not write, evenings had a contemplative quality. Families might sit together, mending clothes, telling stories, or simply listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Without artificial lights, the senses adapted differently. Eyes became attuned to shadows, ears noticed subtle creaks and sighs of the house, and the mind relaxed in the absence of sensory overload. Darkness, once feared by some, became a gentle guide toward rest. It was also a world that required planning. Because artificial light was precious and costly, tasks were timed with care. Food had to be prepared before the sunset. Laundry was done during the day. Animals were fed and stabled in daylight hours. Children were put to bed early, not as a matter of discipline, but because the environment demanded it. There was a harmony between human activity and natural cycles, a rhythm that modern life often obscures. In urban centers, candlelight illuminated busy offices, shops, and homes, but even there, the day slowed in the evening. Clerks copied letters, merchants tallied accounts, and artisans completed work by the flickering flame. The quiet hum of evening productivity was not hurried or frantic. Instead, it was a measured, deliberate pace, each action harmonizing with the dimming light. Sleep was anticipated, and its approach marked by the soft glow fading from windows and streets. Candlelight also shaped thought and imagination. Shadows inspired stories, quiet corners encouraged reflection, and the limited hours of light gave weight to each action. People became intimately aware of the passing day, noticing subtle shifts in sunlight, changes in the wind, and the sounds of evening life. This awareness, though ordinary, reinforced a sense of connection to time, nature, and the body's own needs. Sleep was not imposed by clocks or schedules, it was embraced as a natural continuation of the day. Even after tasks were completed and the house grew still, the rhythm of candlelight continued. Some might rise briefly in the night, tending the hearth, checking on a child, or scribbling a thought. These quiet hours were unhurried, solitary, and reflective. There was no rush to stay awake or be productive, only a gentle attention to life unfolding slowly, measured in flickers of flame and the passage of shadows. For the early American, the day and night were intertwined, each supporting the other. Light signaled activity, warmth, and engagement. Darkness called for rest, reflection, and restoration. There was a natural balance, a harmony that modern artificial illumination often disrupts. By aligning with natural light, people slept when their bodies and minds were ready and awakened refreshed by the returning sun. Their lives were quieter, slower, and more attuned to the natural order. Even as communities grew and candles were supplemented by lanterns and oil lamps, the underlying rhythm persisted. Evening routines, shaped by limited light and deliberate action, continued to guide the population toward rest. Sleep was respected as essential, not rushed or delayed unnecessarily. People's connection to the environment, to natural cycles, and to the gentle passage of time created a calm, measured pace of life. To imagine these evenings today is to step into a world of calm and patience. Picture a family gathered around a table, a single candle burning between them. The wind whispers outside, the house creaks softly, and the day's labor has ended. Meals are finished, chores are done, letters written, and minds begin to unwind. The darkness is gentle, the quiet deepens, and sleep arrives as naturally as the setting sun. In a modern context, it is easy to forget this slow, deliberate rhythm, yet in early America, it was life itself. Time was measured in candlelight, in the careful completion of tasks, and in the gentle winding down of the day. Sleep was not an afterthought, but a natural outcome of living in harmony with light, darkness, and quiet routines. the nation rested each night, not hurriedly or artificially, but with the slow, deliberate grace of people who had learned to move with the world around them. And so, in these quiet evenings of candlelight, early America found its rhythm. The burn of a flame, the soft scratch of a quill, the measured pace of routine, all worked together to create a natural cadence for life and sleep. In the glow of limited light, the nation's people learned to rest, to reflect, and to live gently with the passing hours. Time, measured by candlelight, was slow, deliberate, and deeply human, a rhythm that modern life rarely allows, but one that shaped generations for whom the night was not a threat, but a companion. A calm look at the lives of clerks and record keepers whose work rarely rushed. In early America, the quiet heartbeat of society was often found in the offices and homes of clerks, scribes, and record keepers. These were the individuals whose work rarely demanded urgency, but whose diligence shaped the nation in subtle, enduring ways. While others tilled fields, tended animals, or built homes, clerks sat quietly at tables, their hands moving deliberately, their minds attuned to the rhythm of ink on paper. A clerk's office was a small, orderly world. Shelves lined with ledgers and parchment towered quietly, their pages filled with the meticulous details of commerce, land ownership, and community affairs. Sunlight might filter through a dusty window, catching motes in the air and illuminating letters written weeks or months earlier. The scent of ink and parchment lingered, a subtle perfume of labor and attention. Every scratch of a quill on paper was a sound both ordinary and profound, a soft punctuation in the unfolding story of the town. Clerks were the keepers of continuity. A birth, a marriage, a debt, or a land sale, none escaped their notice. Each detail was recorded carefully, with patience and care. Mistakes were corrected slowly, ink allowed to dry fully before erasing or crossing out a line. The precision was deliberate, not hurried, for accuracy mattered more than speed. In a world without photocopies, typewriters, or computers, every entry was permanent and meaningful. Imagine a small office in a town near a winding river. A clerk sits at a sturdy wooden table, sunlight falling across an open ledger. His quill moves rhythmically, dipping into ink, lifting, and forming letters in a careful, practiced hand. Outside, the sounds of daily life drift faintly through the open window, the clatter of horseshoes on cobblestone, children's laughter, the occasional bark of a dog. Inside, the quiet scratch of quill on paper dominates, a soothing cadence that mirrors the slow, deliberate pace of early American life. Life for clerks was a balance of solitude and connection. They worked alone for long stretches, yet their labor connected them intimately with the community. Every ledger entry was a link between people, the farmer selling grain, the merchant tallying goods, the town council approving expenditures. Clerks rarely sought recognition. Their influence was subtle, embedded in the accuracy and completeness of the records they maintained. In every careful line, they preserved the lives of others. The tools of their trade were simple but essential. Quills were carefully shaped and trimmed, ink prepared from soot or plant materials, and parchment smoothed and stacked in neat piles. Each tool required attention. A quill might need to be recut if the line it produced was too thick. Ink could spill, and parchment could tear, disrupting the delicate rhythm of work. Handling these materials required a gentle touch and patience. Clerks learned to respect the process, understanding that haste would mar the record and, in a small way, disrupt the order of the community. Evenings were quiet for clerks, though not always idle. As the sun set and candlelight flickered, Clerks often continued their work, completing letters, copying important documents, or reviewing the day's entries. The soft glow of candlelight created an intimate, almost meditative environment. Shadows danced across walls and tables, and the flicker of flame seemed to slow time itself. The deliberate pace encouraged reflection, thoughtfulness, and a deep sense of responsibility for the accuracy of each record. Clerks were not only guardians of commerce and law, they were storytellers in their own subtle way. A ledger of debts and payments hinted at the lives and struggles of those recorded within. A list of property transfers revealed family histories, migrations, and the quiet ambitions of settlers. Letters copied or archived by clerks preserved personal voices, thoughts, and feelings that might have otherwise been lost. Each page held fragments of human experience, carefully preserved for posterity. The daily rhythm of a clerk's life was steady and predictable. Morning light marked the beginning of work. Meals were brief and simple, often eaten while seated at the desk. Afternoon brought a lull in external activity, the town slowing as people completed their labor or returned home. By evening, candlelight took over, and the office became a sanctuary of concentration and reflection. Even as other townsfolk moved about, often hurriedly, the clerk's world remained calm, measured, and uninterrupted. Errors were handled with care. A misplaced number, a miswritten name, or a smudge of ink was corrected gently with careful attention to detail. There were no immediate deadlines or pressures to rush. The importance was in precision and permanence. Clerks understood that their work might be referenced years later, forming the backbone of legal decisions, property disputes, or family histories. This awareness imbued each movement with quiet significance. Clerks often worked alongside apprentices or assistants, teaching the next generation the rhythms of careful observation and patient writing. Lessons were learned slowly, emphasizing the value of meticulousness over speed. In this way, knowledge and skills were transmitted deliberately, forming a lineage of caretakers of records and guardians of information. The work itself, repetitive and quiet, became a form of meditation, fostering focus and a deep connection to the unfolding life of the community. Letters played a special role in a clerk's day. Correspondence traveled slowly, often taking days or weeks to reach its destination. A clerk might copy an important letter, ensuring that its content was preserved, before sending it off with a postwriter. Each word was chosen carefully. Mistakes could not be undone once the letter was delivered. The act of copying and reviewing letters brought clerks into intimate proximity with the thoughts and affairs of others, reinforcing the quiet importance of their work. Even the smallest clerical tasks were performed with dignity. Calculations for taxes, inventories for merchants, and minutes from town meetings were recorded with the same careful attention as legal contracts or land deeds. Each task was part of a larger system, a network of information that allowed society to function smoothly. In this way, clerks, though rarely celebrated, became essential to the continuity and order of early America. There was also a contemplative quality to the work. The scratch of quill on paper, the faint smell of ink, the deliberate turning of ledger pages, all combined to create a calm, soothing environment. Clerks could spend hours in quiet focus, their minds attuned to detail and repetition. In these moments, there was a kind of serenity, a steady rhythm that matched the slower pace of life around them. Some clerks kept personal journals or notes, capturing thoughts or reflections alongside official records. These writings were less formal, but no less important, revealing the inner life of someone whose outward work was defined by order and precision. The combination of solitude, attention, and gentle repetition offered both purpose and peace, a life quietly lived in harmony with human needs for focus, connection, and reflection. The legacy of clerks is preserved in the records that survive today. Land deeds, court records, tax rolls, and letters all bear witness to their careful work. Through the gentle sound of paper and quill, they maintained a record of everyday life, preserving stories that might otherwise have vanished. Their labor reminds us that quiet diligence can shape a community as profoundly as public action or loud proclamation. To step into the world of clerks is to slow down. Picture a small office, a single quill moving steadily across parchment. Sunlight drifts through a window, or candlelight flickers softly in the evening. The air is calm, the pace measured, the work deliberate. Outside, life continues. Fields are tilled, markets bustle, but inside, the clerk creates order from chaos, preserves memory, and ensures that the story of the town continues without interruption. In early America, clerks were ordinary people performing extraordinary tasks. They did not seek recognition, yet their work mattered deeply. They held the threads of society in their hands, connecting generations through the written word, safeguarding truth, and recording the quiet details that defined daily life. Their world was slow, calm, and reflective, a reminder that not all labor needs haste to be significant. And so, through the gentle sound of paper and the careful movement of quills, early America was chronicled, preserved, and understood. The lives of clerks and record keepers remind us that patience, diligence, and quiet attention can leave an enduring mark, shaping not only a town or community, but an entire nation. In their calm, methodical work, the rhythm of life itself was recorded, one measured stroke of ink at a time. Following one ordinary piece of paperwork as it moved slowly across towns and colonies. In early America, a single piece of paper could hold more significance than we might imagine today. It might be a simple letter, a ledger entry, or a legal document, yet the journey it undertook was long, deliberate, and quiet stories. Paper did not travel at the speed of electricity or modern transportation. Instead, it moved slowly, carried by hand, horse, or boat, crossing rivers, forests, and hills. Each mile was measured in effort and patience, each day a testament to the rhythms of early life. Imagine a small office in a town along the Hudson River. A clerk dips his quill into ink and writes a notice, a simple deed of land transfer between two neighbors. The handwriting is neat, deliberate, each letter formed carefully. Mistakes are corrected with a gentle blot of ink, as erasing is difficult and messy. Once the document is complete, it is folded and sealed, a small rectangle of parchment containing far more than mere words. It holds trust, legal authority, and a connection between people separated by distance. The clerk places the document in a satchel, ready to be delivered. Its journey is slow by modern standards. A postwriter, a young man on horseback, will carry it over dirt roads that wind through forests and fields. The path is rough. Stones and roots jolt the rider, the horse's hooves kicking up dust and dirt. Along the way, the document may pass through several hands, other clerks, messengers, or town officials, each adding their own stamp, signature, or note. Each hand it passes through adds a subtle layer of story, a quiet witness to the document's slow progress. Weather dictates much of the pace. Rain turns roads to mud, snow slows travel to a crawl, and hot summer days make the journey taxing for both horse and rider. Delays are accepted as part of life. There is no expectation of instant delivery, no frustration at waiting. Instead, the slow movement of the document mirrors the slow rhythms of the world itself, allowing people time to reflect, adjust, and plan. The distance between towns is not measured in miles alone, but in days, the natural flow of human and animal effort shaping the timetable. Along the route, the document encounters the small routines of early American life. In one village, the postwriter stops briefly to rest the horse. He exchanges greetings with neighbors who ask after family and health, and he may share news from other towns. The document sits safely in the satchel during these pauses, yet it is part of a network of communication connecting people across distance. Its journey is not just physical, but social, linking lives and communities together. In a larger town, the document may be sorted among dozens of others. Clerks examine it carefully, verifying names, addresses, and dates. They stamp or initial it, ensuring that its legitimacy is maintained. This careful handling is a quiet ritual, one that guarantees that when the document reaches its destination, it will be trusted and respected. Even as it moves slowly, each step in the process is deliberate, thoughtful, and methodical. Sometimes the journey is interrupted. A bridge might be washed away by a storm, a river swollen and impassable. The document waits patiently in a clerk's office or a small inn, resting among other letters and papers. Days pass, and finally the path clears. The postwriter resumes, navigating familiar paths and unfamiliar terrain, guiding the document toward its ultimate destination. There is a rhythm to these interruptions, a reminder that early America moved according to nature's schedule, not the impatience of modern clocks. As the document progresses, it becomes more than ink on paper. Each crease, smudge, and seal carries evidence of its travels. The slight wear at the edges shows where it has been handled repeatedly. The faint smudge of ink hints at a hurried note added along the way. The document becomes a silent storyteller, recording not just the information it contains, but the journey it has undertaken, the people it has passed, and the small, unnoticed rhythms of daily life in early America. Eventually, the document reaches a distant town, crossing forests, hills, and rivers that took days, sometimes weeks, to navigate. It arrives at the office of another clerk who reads, verifies, and files it carefully. Its journey is complete, yet the story does not end. The information it carries now becomes part of the life of the town. Land is transferred, families make plans, taxes are recorded, and the document's influence unfolds slowly but surely. The journey has shaped both the physical world and the decisions made by those who receive it. Letters often accompanied such documents, traveling alongside with news, personal stories, or requests. These letters, like the legal papers, moved at a pace dictated by natural forces and human effort. Families waited for responses patiently, learning to live with the slow unfolding of communication. Each reply was treasured, each arrival anticipated, and the act of waiting became part of the rhythm of life. The document, in its quiet way, taught people patience, foresight, and reflection. Even when it was filed and stored, the document retained the subtle evidence of its journey. Its pages might be slightly worn, the edges softened, the ink a little faded. Yet these small imperfections were marks of authenticity, proof of the care, effort, and passage of time. In this way, the document was not just a record, it was a participant in history, a quiet witness to the slow rhythms of daily life across towns and colonies. The long journey of a single document reminds us of the human effort behind every record. Modern society often overlooks the time, attention, and patience required to move information from one place to another. In early America, every message was deliberate, every transfer of information slow but meaningful. People were connected not instantaneously, but thoughtfully, intentionally, and with attention to detail that ensured trust and accuracy. To imagine this journey today is to slow down. Picture the document folded neatly in a satchel, moving through countryside and town, accompanied by the clatter of hooves, the creak of wheels, or the quiet hush of a clerk's office. Each step is measured, deliberate, and meaningful. The document's progress is not hurried, nor does it need to be. Its journey teaches a rhythm of patience, reflection, and trust, a reminder of a slower, gentler pace of life. By following a single piece of paper, we glimpse the unseen structures that allowed early America to function. The network of clerks, writers, and messengers formed a quiet infrastructure connecting towns and colonies through careful attention and meticulous effort. Each document, no matter how ordinary, played a role in the delicate choreography of society, supporting commerce, governance, and personal life. Even after it is filed away, the document continues to matter. Future generations may open it, read its words, and discover the subtle stories it carries. It serves as a bridge between people and places, past and present. The journey that seemed so slow at the time becomes a testament to endurance, patience, and the human ability to maintain connection across distance and time. In this way, a single piece of paperwork, ordinary in appearance, becomes extraordinary in its quiet significance. It embodies the slow, deliberate rhythm of early America, a nation where distance, effort, and patience shaped life as profoundly as any grand event or battle. The document's journey reminds us that even the simplest objects can hold stories of endurance, connection, and meaning. To imagine this world is to step into a gentler time. The soft scratch of a quill, the faint smell of ink, the creak of leather-bound satchels, the measured trot of a horse, these are the sounds of communication, the quiet background of everyday life. Each document, carefully handled and carefully transported, reminds us of a rhythm shaped not by urgency, but by patience, care, and reflection. And so, the long journey of a single document is more than a tale of ink on paper. It is a story of human effort, of connection across distance, of trust and deliberation. It is a meditation on time, patience, and the quiet power of everyday life. In its slow progress from one town to another, it carries the essence of a world built carefully, thoughtfully, and intentionally, a world where even ordinary paperwork could be a vessel for history, and where every journey, no matter how long, was worth taking. Exploring courthouse routines that ended early, allowing nights to remain undisturbed. In early America, the rhythm of life was shaped not only by the sun and the seasons, but by the quiet routines of local institutions. Among the most important of these were county offices and courthouses. These buildings, often modest and unassuming, were centers of record-keeping, law, and governance. Yet despite the weight of their duties, the workday ended early, allowing evenings and nights to remain undisturbed. Life moved deliberately, and the town's heartbeat slowed as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Imagine a small courthouse in a rural county. The building is constructed of brick or timber, windows tall but few, allowing sunlight to filter in gently during the day. Inside, the air carries the faint scent of wood, ink, and paper. Clerks, judges, and other officials move deliberately, their steps measured, their voices calm. There is a sense of quiet order, a rhythm dictated by necessity and the natural progression of daylight. Mornings in the courthouse begin with preparation. Clerks arrange ledgers and documents, dust settles gently on wooden counters, and officials review their tasks for the day. Legal proceedings, property registrations, and tax collections are handled with care. Each task is approached deliberately. Accuracy matters more than speed. There is no rush to extend the day beyond its natural bounds. The courthouse operates efficiently but calmly, always mindful of the approaching evening. Court sessions often began at first light, allowing the community to complete business before the day's work elsewhere grew urgent. Farmers, merchants, and townsfolk traveled from nearby villages to attend to matters of law, commerce, or registration. The sound of hooves on dirt roads, the occasional creak of a wagon, and the soft murmur of conversation created a gentle background to the courthouse's orderly environment. Inside, the rhythm was slower still, dictated by careful recording, measured speech, and deliberate movements. Clerks played a vital role in this world. They kept minutes of meetings, copied legal documents, and ensured that records were preserved for future reference. Quills moved rhythmically across parchment, ink drying slowly under the careful attention of hands accustomed to precision. Mistakes were corrected with patience, as every record was meant to endure. Each page, once filed, became a permanent witness to the day's work, quietly influencing the community for years to come. By midday, the courthouse often hummed with activity, yet there was no sense of urgency. People moved with purpose but not haste. Legal matters were handled carefully, petitions and disputes were addressed methodically. The early American approach emphasized thoughtfulness, fairness, and the preservation of order. Even when disagreements arose, voices remained moderate and the pace of resolution was measured. Here, the law was enforced, but the day was paced to preserve calm, both inside the building and outside in the surrounding community. As afternoon faded, activity in the courthouse slowed naturally. Clerks finished copying records, judges concluded hearings, and visitors returned home with tasks completed. Windows filled with the warm glow of late afternoon sun, and the air seemed to hold a quiet hush. In many towns, county offices had a practice of closing in the early evening. This was not due to lack of work, but out of respect for natural rhythms. People needed to return to their homes, light was limited, and the night was meant for rest. Evenings at the edge of the day carried their own gentle rituals. Fires were tended, lamps and candles lit for domestic tasks, and the courthouse itself emptied into quiet streets. Townsfolk carried letters, receipts, and legal papers back to their homes, where they might be reviewed under the soft glow of candlelight. Life continued, but the pace slowed in harmony with the natural cycles. The closure of public offices ensured that nighttime remained a sanctuary of calm, undisturbed by bureaucratic demands. The architecture of courthouses also reflected this rhythm. Rooms were simple and functional, with heavy wooden tables and benches. Windows were positioned to maximize daylight, reducing the need for artificial illumination. Ledgers, parchments, and documents were stored in orderly stacks, easily accessible but carefully preserved. Everything was designed to facilitate calm, deliberate work during daylight hours and to allow nights to remain quiet, restorative, and free from the pressures of the office. Clerks and officials often spent the last hour of the day reviewing what had been accomplished. Documents were filed, records double-checked, and the next day's schedule prepared. There was a reflective quality to this work, a recognition that the courthouse's function extended beyond immediate tasks. It maintained continuity, preserved community memory, and safeguarded the framework of law and governance. The day's end was respected, and the transition to evening was gradual, deliberate, and peaceful. Outside the courthouse, the town mirrored this pace. Streets emptied, shops closed, and families returned to hearth and home. Conversations softened, footsteps became quieter, and the sounds of work faded into the evening air. In the absence of modern electric lights, the sunset itself signaled the end of activity. Residents knew that the courthouse, and by extension, civic life, would resume with the dawn, and until then, nights were a time for rest and reflection. The gentle routines of county offices also reinforced a sense of community. People learned to plan their visits, to respect office hours, and to understand the natural flow of public life. There was no expectation that business should intrude into evenings or nights. Instead, the pace of the courthouse aligned with human needs, creating an environment where productivity and calm coexisted, where order and patience were equally valued. Records produced in these offices often held stories of ordinary life. Land transactions told of families growing and moving. Legal documents recorded disputes and resolutions. Minutes of meetings captured the voices of community leaders and the concerns of townsfolk. Through the meticulous work of clerks, these ordinary details were preserved, providing insight not just into the law, but into the daily life, values, and rhythms of early America. Even the architecture and layout of county offices reflected the importance of balance. Desks and tables were spaced to allow for quiet work, windows positioned to catch the most light, and shelves organized for ease of access. Courthouse routines were deliberately designed to fit within daylight hours, ensuring that nights were reserved for rest. The result was a system that respected both human effort and natural cycles, creating a rhythm of life that was measured, deliberate, and gentle. As dusk approached, the courthouse doors closed, the last quill strokes made, and the final document filed. The building itself seemed to exhale, settling into quiet anticipation of the next day. Outside, lanterns flickered briefly before being extinguished, and the town settled into the natural cadence of evening. People ate, conversed quietly, and prepared for sleep, secure in the knowledge that civic life would resume with the morning sun. This balance between work and rest, between daylight and night, left a lasting impression on communities. The courthouse was not just a place of authority, it was a part of the rhythm of life, a signal of order and calm. Its early closure preserved the sanctity of evening, teaching a generation that work and life were best approached in harmony with natural cycles. To imagine a county office at the edge of the day is to imagine patience, care, and quiet reflection. Picture clerks reviewing ledgers, judges ending hearings, townsfolk finishing their errands. Sunlight fades, shadows lengthen, and the world outside grows calm. Candles are lit at home, fires crackle softly, and streets empty into a tranquil hush. Nights are preserved as a sanctuary, undisturbed, allowing sleep and restoration to unfold naturally. In early America, the courthouse was both practical and symbolic. Its routines shaped society, guided behavior, and reinforced the importance of natural rhythms. The early closure of offices ensured that nights remained sacred, a time for rest, reflection, and family. Work was accomplished, records maintained, and life moved forward, all without disturbing the calm of evening. And so, at the edge of the day, county offices provided a gentle rhythm to civic life. The careful work of clerks, the orderly proceedings of courts, and the deliberate pace of public business created a world where evening was protected, where nights were calm, and where the passage of time was measured not in haste, but in the slow, deliberate unfolding of human life. In this quiet, orderly world, early America preserved the balance between labor and rest, ensuring that the night remained a time for peace, reflection, and sleep.
How writing by hand encouraged patience, repetition, and mental calm. Before the clatter of typewriters, the hum of printers, or the endless glow of computer screens, writing in early America was an act of patience and reflection. Words traveled from mind to paper slowly, deliberately, with quills or pens dipping into ink. Each letter required care. Each sentence demanded attention. In this era, the weight of words was literal as well as figurative. Writing by hand shaped not only records but also the rhythm of thought, encouraging repetition, focus, and a kind of calm that modern machines rarely allow. Imagine a small study in a quiet New England home. The morning light streams through a window, dust motes floating lazily in its beams. A young clerk sits at a wooden desk, a sheet of parchment before him, quill in hand. The ink is freshly prepared, dark and glossy, glinting faintly as it pools at the tip. He pauses for a moment, considering the first word of a letter or ledger entry, then draws the quill carefully across the page. The scratching sound is soft, steady, almost meditative. Each stroke slows the mind, shaping thoughts into deliberate, measured form. In early America, handwriting was a skill cultivated with care. Young people learned to form letters slowly, tracing curves and lines until the shapes became second nature. Mistakes were corrected with blotting and careful erasures, each adjustment requiring patience. The very act of forming letters encouraged attention, repetition, and mindfulness. A paragraph of carefully written text might take hours, and yet the effort was not frustrating, it was a practice in focus and mental calm. Clerks, scholars, and everyday citizens alike understood that handwritten words carried weight. A document, once inked, was permanent. Letters could be read by others, and records could be referenced years later. The permanence of handwriting demanded care. A hurried stroke could mar a name. A smudge could obscure a number. A blot could obscure meaning. In this way, the act of writing itself shaped the writer's behavior, encouraging careful thought, deliberate pacing, and quiet reflection. The daily rhythm of handwritten work was slow but consistent. Morning might be devoted to copying ledgers, reviewing accounts, or writing letters. Afternoon could be spent reviewing documents, preparing legal records, or practicing penmanship. Each task required focus, repetition, and care. Even the simple act of writing a personal note demanded time. Words were considered carefully, phrases chosen deliberately, sentences crafted with attention. In this rhythm, the mind unwound, and the act of writing became a gentle exercise in patience. Candlelight often extended the writing day. As the sun set, flickering flames illuminated desks and papers, casting shadows that danced softly across walls. In this gentle light, writing slowed even further. Each movement of the quill became deliberate, each glance at the page intentional. There was no rush to finish, no pressure of urgency. The quiet repetition of forming letters, words, and sentences was soothing. Thought and action aligned, creating a calm, deliberate pace that mirrored the fading day. Even mundane tasks like copying a ledger or transcribing a letter became exercises in patience. Clerks would pause, dipping quills into ink repeatedly, adjusting pressure to form perfect letters, aligning columns carefully. There was a rhythm to the repetition. Quill down, quill up, word completed, line completed, page completed. In the repetition, the mind slowed, thought clarified, and attention settled. Errors were corrected thoughtfully, not hastily. Each page, once complete, stood as a testament to careful, deliberate work. Handwriting also encouraged reflection. A writer might pause to consider a phrase, to reword a sentence, or to add small notes in the margins. The process of writing by hand allowed time for thought to settle, for ideas to develop, and for clarity to emerge. There was space for reflection in every line, a quiet interval in which the mind could rest. Unlike modern machines which reward speed and productivity, handwriting demanded slowness, encouraging calm and mental balance. In schools, children learned these skills methodically. Copybooks and penmanship exercises required repetition of letters, words, and sentences until the movements became fluid and familiar. This repetition was not punishment, it was practice, cultivating patience, focus, and a sense of order. By the time a young person could write neatly and efficiently, they had learned the value of measured work, the calm that arises from slow, deliberate attention, and the satisfaction of seeing effort take shape on paper. Even in commerce, handwriting was essential. Merchants recorded transactions in ledgers, noting each sale, payment, or debt with care. A miswritten number could disrupt business, so clerks took their time. Each page became a reflection of daily life, a record of human effort and social interaction. In handling these documents, both writer and reader developed patience. There was time to check, to reflect, to consider consequences, and to act with intention. Letters were especially significant. In a world without instant messaging or telephones, communication relied on writing. People composed letters carefully, considering each word, knowing that the recipient might wait days or weeks for delivery. The act of writing became both a practical necessity and a contemplative exercise. The letter's journey, like the writer's effort, was slow and deliberate. The care given to penmanship reflected care in thought and emotion.
Each letter was a bridge between people, an enduring connection carried by ink and paper. The permanence of handwriting also encouraged mindfulness. Unlike fleeting speech or digital text, a handwritten document could be revisited, studied, and referenced for years. Words mattered, and attention to detail was rewarded. Each completed page offered a sense of accomplishment, a tangible result of careful, focused work. The repetition, slowness, and attention to detail fostered not only accuracy, but also calm, patience, and quiet satisfaction. In many households, even personal notes and journals were treated with care. Diaries were written thoughtfully, each entry carefully dated, and thoughts expressed in deliberate sentences. The physical act of writing, the movement of the hand, the sound of quill on paper, the feel of parchment or paper beneath fingertips, created a connection between mind and body. The rhythm of writing became a form of meditation, a gentle alignment of thought, motion, and reflection. The weight of words before machines was literal in another sense as well. Ink, quills, and paper required preparation. Ink had to be mixed or purchased, quills cut and trimmed, and paper measured and folded. Each element demanded attention, slowing the process further and deepening the writer's engagement. Writing was never purely abstract. It involved physical care, deliberate action, and repetition, all contributing to a slower, calmer mental state.
In offices, schools, and homes alike, the deliberate pace of handwriting shaped behavior. It taught patience, encouraged reflection, and fostered a sense of order and calm. Mistakes were corrected thoughtfully. Repetition was embraced as a tool for learning, and focus was valued above speed. In this environment, the act of writing was more than communication. It was a way to align the mind with the natural rhythm of effort, reflection, and rest. To imagine this world today is to slow down. Picture a clerk at a desk, quill moving steadily, ink pooling and drying, letters forming carefully. Sunlight fades, candlelight flickers, and time passes gently. Each page completed is a small triumph, a testament to patience and deliberate effort. In the quiet repetition of handwriting, the mind finds calm, and thoughts settle like dust in a sunbeam. Handwriting before machines was a quiet art, a form of meditation, and a method of shaping life with care. Its weight was felt in each stroke, in each word, in each completed page. In a modern world that prizes speed, it reminds us of the value of slowness, reflection, and deliberate effort. Through the simple act of putting pen to paper, early Americans cultivated patience, repetition, and mental calm, a rhythm that allowed both work and thought to unfold gently, thoughtfully, and intentionally. And so, before machines, words carried weight. They demanded attention, fostered reflection, and encouraged a calm, deliberate pace. Each handwritten page became more than a record. It was a practice, a ritual, and a quiet meditation. In the rhythm of quill, ink, and paper, early America learned the art of patience, the value of repetition, and the gentle serenity that comes from moving slowly, deliberately, and with intention. In early America, life moved with a slower rhythm, one measured not by clocks or schedules, but by the careful organization of daily activity. One of the quietest yet most essential elements of this rhythm was the creation of lists, registers, and other records. From town ledgers to personal journals, these orderly collections of information offered more than mere documentation. They provided a sense of stability and predictability, a quiet reassurance that, even as the day ended, all was accounted for. Imagine a small clerk's office in a rural town. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with stacks of neatly bound ledgers. Each page contains carefully written entries, land deeds, tax records, lists of townsfolk, inventories of goods. The clerk moves methodically between desks, quill in hand, correcting an entry here, adding a new name there. The scratching of pen on paper a gentle, repetitive rhythm. Outside, the day unfolds at its natural pace, while inside, every record is maintained with precision, creating an underlying order that mirrors the calm of the world. Lists were everywhere. Merchants maintained inventories of goods, noting purchases, debts, and payments. Families kept household accounts, tracking provisions, chores, and supplies. Town officials recorded births, marriages, deaths, and property transfers in registers that served as the foundation of civic life. Each list, though simple, created a map of human activity, a reassuring framework that made the complexity of daily life comprehensible. The act of maintaining order had a profound effect on the mind. When records were complete, when ledgers were neat and accurate, people could rest with a sense of certainty. Decisions made during the day could be traced and verified. Obligations were recorded, debts accounted for, and agreements formalized. There was no lingering uncertainty about who owed what, who lived where, or what tasks had been completed. This clarity allowed evenings to unfold gently, without the restless agitation that often accompanies unanswered questions. Even personal lists carried this calming effect. A mother might jot down provisions needed for the next week, checking items off as they were gathered. A farmer could maintain a list of livestock, crops, or tools, noting any repairs required. These small acts of recording transformed abstract responsibilities into tangible, manageable items. The mind, once freed from the burden of uncertainty, could relax as night approached, confident that order had been maintained. In official registers, too, the power of order was evident. Town clerks took care to ensure every entry was precise and complete. Dates were checked, names spelled correctly, and information cross-referenced against previous records. These actions, though painstaking, created a stable record for the community. A well-kept ledger was a source of quiet reassurance for all who relied upon it: property owners, merchants, officials, and families alike. Each neatly recorded fact contributed to the invisible architecture of daily life. Evenings were particularly influenced by these systems of order. As the sun sank low and shadows stretched across streets and fields, townsfolk could review their own lists or rest knowing that official registers were accurate. The completion of a day's work in written form created a sense of closure. Chores were checked off, transactions verified, and appointments noted. When lists were maintained, there was less need for worry. Nighttime became a time for rest rather than rumination, a gentle descent into calm sleep supported by the stability of the day's records. The process of writing lists and maintaining registers also encouraged mindfulness and reflection. Each entry required attention, thought, and precision. Clerks and citizens alike were slowed by the necessity of accuracy. The repetition of recording, writing names, numbers, and details, became a form of meditation. Focused attention on small, ordinary tasks allowed the mind to settle, to process, and to release the anxieties of the day. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing a ledger complete, a list crossed off, a register updated, a reassurance that order prevailed. Lists also served as memory aids. In a world without instant communication, reminders were crucial. A record of debts, payments, or agreements ensured that obligations would not be forgotten. Inventories of goods or supplies helped families plan for upcoming days, preventing shortages or missed tasks. Even simple lists of names for attendance or participation provided a sense of certainty in communal life. This externalization of memory reduced mental burden, allowing individuals to focus on living rather than endlessly recalling details. Consider a small household preparing for winter. A mother writes down the provisions she has gathered and what still needs attention. A father checks his list of firewood, tools, and repairs. Each task is accounted for, each resource noted. Evenings were particularly influenced by these systems of order. As the sun sank low and shadows stretched across streets and fields, townsfolk could review their own lists or rest knowing that official registers were accurate. The completion of a day's work in written form created a sense of closure. Chores were checked off, transactions verified, and appointments noted. When lists were maintained, there was less need for worry. Nighttime became a time for rest rather than rumination, a gentle descent into calm sleep supported by the stability of the day's records. The process of writing lists and maintaining registers also encouraged mindfulness and reflection. Each entry required attention, thought, and precision. Clerks and citizens alike were slowed by the necessity of accuracy. The repetition of recording, writing names, numbers, and details, became a form of meditation. Focused attention on small, ordinary tasks allowed the mind to settle, to process, and to release the anxieties of the day. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing a ledger complete, a list crossed off, a register updated, a reassurance that order prevailed. Lists also served as memory aids. In a world without instant communication, reminders were crucial. A record of debts, payments, or agreements ensured that obligations would not be forgotten. Inventories of goods or supplies helped families plan for upcoming days, preventing shortages or missed tasks. Even simple lists of names for attendance or participation provided a sense of certainty in communal life. This externalization of memory reduced mental burden, allowing individuals to focus on living rather than endlessly recalling details. Consider a small household preparing for winter. A mother writes down the provisions she has gathered and what still needs attention. A father checks his list of firewood, tools, and repairs. Each task is accounted for, each resource noted. When night falls, both can retire with confidence. The lists ensure that nothing essential is overlooked. The mind is free from lingering worry. The body and spirit can rest, soothed by the knowledge that order has been maintained. In towns and villages, civic lists offered similar reassurance. Tax rolls, court records, and land registers provided structure to community life. Citizens knew that their responsibilities were documented, that agreements and disputes could be referenced, and that the community's memory was preserved. This stability allowed the population to trust in the continuity of civic systems, reducing anxiety and fostering a calm, predictable environment. Even small errors in lists could prompt careful review, teaching diligence and patience. Clerks would revisit ledgers, double-checking numbers and names, ensuring that every entry was accurate. This slow, methodical process reinforced the value of attention to detail. The act of maintaining order was both practical and soothing, allowing individuals to approach life with clarity and calm. The repetition, focus, and gentle rhythm of recording created a mental state conducive to rest. The physical presence of lists also provided comfort. Seeing a ledger closed neatly, a list fully checked off, or a register updated created a tangible sense of completion. The visual confirmation of order reassured the mind, providing a quiet stability that words alone could not. This tactile experience of organization, the smooth pages, the neat ink, the lined columns, was calming, a signal that life was accounted for and that the day's work had been done. At night, the comfort of these records became even more evident. As families gathered around candles or hearth fires, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that everything had been noted, checked, and preserved. The day's responsibilities were documented. The mind could release its vigilance. The stability created by lists and registers allowed sleep to come easily, uninterrupted by uncertainty or anxiety. Order became a gentle companion, guiding the body and mind toward rest. The lessons of orderly records extended beyond the day itself. By cultivating habits of careful documentation, early Americans reinforced patience, focus, and responsibility. Writing lists, maintaining ledgers, and updating registers was not merely a bureaucratic task, it was a practice that shaped character, fostering a calm and methodical approach to life. Even as years passed and towns grew, these habits of order continued to influence behavior, creating communities rooted in predictability and trust. To imagine this world is to imagine calm diligence. Picture a clerk reviewing a ledger, a mother crossing off items in a household list, a merchant tallying accounts. The day is ending, the sun fades, and shadows stretch across streets and fields. Each record is complete, each task accounted for. The mind, reassured by the stability of order, begins to relax. Evening becomes a gentle bridge to night, a transition marked by calm, confidence, and the quiet knowledge that everything is as it should be. In early America, lists and registers were more than tools, they were anchors. They offered reassurance in a world without instant communication, creating stability that eased the mind and allowed restful sleep. Order, carefully maintained, was a source of comfort. Each entry, each cross-off, each completed page contributed to a rhythm of life that aligned with natural cycles, human needs, and the quiet unfolding of community and domestic life. And so, through lists, registers, and the deliberate maintenance of records, early Americans found a gentle sense of security. The world was mapped, accounted for, and remembered. The mind could rest, knowing that order prevailed. Nighttime became a sanctuary, uninterrupted, as the comfort of records guided people toward sleep. In the deliberate creation of order, early America discovered a quiet, enduring stability, a reassurance that life, when carefully documented, could be gentle, predictable, and calm. Weeks of waiting for replies, and how absence of urgency supported deeper rest. In early America, communication moved slowly, deliberately, and with a quiet rhythm that modern life has all but forgotten. Letters were carried by horseback, by wagon, or by boat, and journeys that seem brief today often took days, even weeks. Messages traveled according to the pace of the natural world, shaped by the weather, the terrain, and the endurance of those who carried them. In this era, the silence between correspondence was not empty. It was a space for reflection, for patience, and for deeper rest. Imagine a small home in a colonial village. A letter has been written and sealed, carefully folded and placed in a leather pouch. The sender knows that it may take days or weeks to reach its destination. There is no expectation of instant reply, no sense of urgency. Instead, life continues at a steady pace. Chores are completed, meals prepared, and routines followed. The absence of immediate response creates a gentle rhythm, a pause between thought and reply that encourages the mind to settle. While waiting for letters, people cultivated patience naturally. There were no notifications, no screens demanding attention. Days passed slowly, measured by sunlight, seasons, and tasks. Waiting for correspondence became a quiet exercise in mindfulness. The mind, freed from the expectation of rapid feedback, could focus on the present, the daily work of home, the small rhythms of town life, and the steady unfolding of each day. The journey of a letter itself was long and deliberate. A postwriter set out in the morning, traveling along dirt roads or narrow paths through forests. Horses trotted steadily, occasionally pausing to rest. Rivers were crossed by ferries or small boats, and inns provided brief pauses where travelers and their cargo could be refreshed. Along the way, the letter might be handled by multiple clerks, each adding a stamp, a note, or a mark of acknowledgement. Every step took time, and every day of transit was filled with ordinary tasks that slowed life in a way that modern messages cannot replicate. The intervals of silence were not frustrating, but restorative. Knowing that a reply could not arrive immediately allowed the mind to let go of urgency. Thoughts could meander slowly, without interruption. People reflected on the content of the letter, considered their own responses, and engaged with the present rather than being consumed by anticipation. The space between sending and receiving became a gentle, meditative pause. For families separated by distance, this waiting was part of the rhythm of life. A father might send a letter to his children at boarding school. A mother might correspond with a distant relative. Days and weeks passed before a reply arrived, yet life continued. Children learned to occupy themselves. Parents carried on with household work, and the community functioned at a slow, steady pace. The delay was built into the fabric of daily existence, offering a kind of calm that modern instantaneous communication rarely allows. In town offices, letters were received, recorded, and sorted with care. Clerks ensured that each letter reached its intended recipient, but the process was methodical, not hurried. Postal routes were organized according to practical considerations: daylight hours, safe passages, and available riders. The absence of urgency preserved the orderliness of communication and reinforced a sense of patience in the community. People knew that messages would arrive, and they trusted in the process without needing constant updates. Even in personal correspondence, waiting shaped reflection. A letter written in the morning might not be read for several days. By the time it arrived, the recipient had the benefit of perspective. Thoughts could be considered more fully, emotions tempered by time, and decisions made with care. Writing and receiving letters became a collaborative dance across space and time, paced by deliberate slowness. The delay encouraged thoughtfulness, the luxury of introspection, and a calm engagement with both the message and the world. Even the physical act of preparing letters contributed to this rhythm. Quills had to be sharpened, ink prepared, and parchment carefully folded. Every stroke of writing required attention and care. Once complete, the letter was sealed and entrusted to the postal system. This process, slow by modern standards, reinforced a sense of patience and purpose. Sending a letter was not just communication, it was a ritual, a deliberate action that prepared the mind for waiting. The anticipation of a reply was also a form of gentle suspense. Weeks passed without interruption, allowing the mind to wander and reflect. In this space, thoughts could settle, anxieties could diminish, daily life could be experienced without the intrusion of constant communication. The absence of immediacy created a natural rhythm of attention and reflection, a rhythm that contributed to restful sleep and a quieter mental state. When a reply finally arrived, it was an event. The opening of the envelope, the unfolding of parchment, and the careful reading of the words all unfolded slowly. The letter was savored, not rushed. Its arrival punctuated the calm interval of waiting, providing satisfaction and closure. The weeks of silence preceding it had allowed the mind to rest, so that the content of the letter could be absorbed fully, calmly, and without distraction. Even in towns with regular postal service, the slowness was instructive. Merchants, officials, and families alike became accustomed to the measured pace of information. Decisions were made with deliberation, plans were formed with care, and life moved with a balance of action and reflection. The rhythm of correspondence shaped not only communication, but the very cadence of life itself. Letters also created a sense of community despite distance. They connected families, towns, and colonies. Each letter carried not just information, but a trace of the sender, their handwriting, the slight smudge of ink, the rhythm of their pen. These tangible details made the recipient aware of the human presence behind the words, fostering empathy, patience, and reflection. The delay in delivery added weight and significance to the connection, reinforcing the value of thoughtful communication. In households, letters were often read aloud, shared among family members, or displayed for days before being archived. The act of reading became a communal, slow experience, inviting reflection and discussion. The time between correspondence allowed families to process the news, anticipate the reply, and integrate the message into daily life. Waiting, far from being empty, was filled with a gentle engagement with the present. Even business correspondence benefited from this pace. Orders, contracts, and agreements moved slowly, giving both parties time to consider terms carefully. Mistakes were less likely because decisions could not be rushed. The intervals of waiting created a natural buffer, allowing thoughtfulness to flourish and stress to diminish. The absence of urgency, paradoxically, increased efficiency and clarity in the long run. As night fell in early America, the silence between correspondence contributed to rest. Families closed their doors, extinguished lamps, and reflected on the day. Letters awaited their turn in neat piles, ready for reading or writing at the next opportunity. The calm intervals of waiting, the deliberate pace of communication, and the absence of immediate expectation allowed minds to release tension. Sleep came more easily when the world's demands were measured by the natural passage of time rather than the incessant buzz of modern communication. In this way, the silence between letters was a gift. Weeks of waiting created space for reflection, for calm, and for mental restoration. Life moved at a deliberate pace, and the rhythms of sending and receiving correspondence were intertwined with the natural cycles of work, rest, and thought. In this slowness, people found a gentle balance, a rhythm that encouraged both mindfulness and rest. The journey of letters, with all its deliberate slowness, reminds us of the value of patience. The world did not demand constant response. People had time to think, to feel, to observe, and to rest. The intervals of waiting, far from frustrating, were integral to the rhythm of life. They allowed deeper engagement with messages and daily life, supporting calm, reflection, and a sense of order. And so, in the silence between correspondence, early Americans discovered a subtle form of tranquility. Weeks of waiting were not wasted, they were lived slowly, deliberately, and attentively. The absence of urgency nurtured reflection, mental calm, and peaceful sleep. In the quiet gaps between letters, the mind could rest, the heart could settle, and the rhythm of life continued gently, naturally, and intentionally, a rhythm that allowed human thought, connection, and rest to coexist in harmony. How predictable systems reduced anxiety in an uncertain world. In early America, life was full of uncertainties. Weather could ruin crops, rivers could flood without warning, and travel often took longer than expected. Yet amidst these uncertainties, one quiet stabilizer existed: paper trails. The careful maintenance of records, ledgers, inventories, deeds, and correspondence provided a predictable structure that helped communities function and offered individuals a sense of security. In a world of unknowns, these paper trails brought clarity, reassurance, and a subtle mental calm that allowed people to rest easier at night. Imagine a small clerk's office in a bustling colonial town. Sunlight filters through tall windows, falling across a polished wooden desk stacked with ledgers. Quills scratch steadily against parchment, ink drying slowly as clerks record property sales, tax payments, and agreements. Each line is deliberate, each page a carefully organized account of human activity. Outside, the town moves with its usual rhythms: horses trotting, children playing, merchants calling out their wares. But inside, the ordered pages create a sense of stability, a quiet anchor in an otherwise unpredictable world. Paper trails were more than records, they were a framework for trust. A land deed documented ownership, preventing disputes before they arose. A ledger of accounts ensured debts were tracked and payments honored. Registers of births, marriages, and deaths provided an official memory of community life. These predictable systems allowed townsfolk to navigate uncertainty with confidence, knowing that their affairs were recorded accurately, verifiably, and durably. The act of recording itself was a slow, deliberate process. Clerks and record keepers approached each task with care, understanding that accuracy mattered more than speed. Quills were dipped carefully, letters formed precisely, and entries double-checked. Mistakes were corrected thoughtfully, not hurriedly. This attention to detail ensured that paper trails remained trustworthy. Over time, these records built up a visible map of predictable activity, a reassurance that life, though uncertain, could be understood, measured, and managed. Even daily routines were shaped by the stability of records. Merchants relied on ledgers to track sales and stock, ensuring that resources were managed effectively. Farmers kept accounts of livestock and produce, balancing expectations against reality. Families maintained journals, noting chores, provisions, and expenses. Each document, no matter how ordinary, added to a network of predictability, providing peace of mind and reducing the anxiety that uncertainty could otherwise provoke.
Consider a family preparing for winter. The father consults a ledger of past harvests, the mother reviews a household inventory, and children check lists of supplies. Through these records, each member of the family knows what has been done and what still requires attention. Decisions are made deliberately, resources are allocated carefully, and the unknowns of the coming season are mitigated by the knowledge captured on paper. Predictability is not absolute, but it is enough to foster calm and confidence. Even civic systems relied on predictable paper trails. Town meetings, tax rolls, and legal proceedings were documented with care, ensuring that governance operated transparently. Citizens could reference previous decisions, understand their obligations, and anticipate what was required of them. This consistency created a stable framework for social life. People knew what to expect, could rely on documented agreements, and felt less anxious about navigating civic responsibilities. The predictability of paper trails also shaped mental habits. Knowing that information was recorded allowed people to release mental burdens. Tasks that might otherwise occupy thought were externalized onto paper. Clerks, merchants, and families alike could rest assured that accounts, agreements, and obligations were documented. With information safely preserved, minds were freer to focus on immediate tasks, reflection, and rest. The simple act of knowing that a record existed reduced worry, allowing for a calmer, more measured approach to life. In the courts and county offices, this system of order was even more apparent. Legal disputes could be traced back through carefully maintained records. Ownership, contracts, and agreements were verifiable because they were documented. Citizens relied on these predictable systems, trusting that their affairs would be managed fairly and consistently. This reliability, built on meticulous paperwork, brought comfort to people living in an otherwise unpredictable world. Even correspondence followed predictable patterns. Letters, carried by horseback or wagon, were logged in town offices. Receipts were recorded, messages copied, and delivery times noted. The pace was deliberate, and yet the structure offered reassurance. People knew that their letters would reach their destination in order, that messages were accounted for, and that communication could be trusted to function reliably. The predictability of correspondence mirrored the larger network of paper-based systems, reinforcing calm and reducing uncertainty. The mental benefits of predictable systems were subtle but powerful. Anxiety often stems from the unknown, uncertain obligations, untracked debts, forgotten agreements. Paper trails countered this by creating tangible evidence of completion, progress, and accountability. Each entry in a ledger, each note in a journal, each stamped document in a county office represented a small victory over the unpredictable forces of life. With these records in place, people could sleep more easily, knowing that the essentials of life were accounted for, preserved, and understood, a comfort that carried them peacefully into sleep.
What evenings felt like when government slept alongside its people. In early America, the rhythm of life was guided as much by the natural world as by human institutions. The sun rose, people worked, and the sun set, marking the passage of time with simplicity and clarity. Among the quiet patterns of daily life, one of the most overlooked was the rhythm of government itself. Offices, courts, and administrative centers operated only during daylight hours. When evening fell, government rested, its pace mirroring that of the people it served. Nightfall was not just a cessation of labor, it was a gentle alignment of civic life with the natural world, a time when bureaucracy, like its citizens, could breathe. Imagine a small colonial town at dusk. The streets, once bustling with merchants, farmers, and townsfolk, begin to empty. The courthouse, post office, and town hall, once filled with the rustle of capers and the scratch of quills, are now quiet. Clerks finish their work for the day, carefully filing documents, closing ledgers, and extinguishing candles. The last rays of sunlight filter through windows, catching on inked pages, wood, and stone. There is a palpable hush, as if the town itself has exhaled, relieved of the day's activity. During daylight, administration moved methodically but slowly. Clerks recorded transactions, judges presided over hearings, and officials documented civic business. Everything was deliberate. Mistakes were corrected with care, accounts were verified, and letters were filed. The pace was unhurried, constrained by the limitations of pen, ink, and human endurance. There was no pressure to rush, no expectation of constant output. Government in early America was measured, deliberate, and respectful of natural time, a rhythm that extended into the evening. As night approached, the transition was gentle. Doors to offices closed, shutters were drawn, and the town shifted from business life to domestic life. Horses returned to stables, wagons were unloaded, and merchants counted their remaining goods before securing them for the night. Families gathered around fires, preparing meals, sharing stories, or reading by candlelight. Outside, the sky turned to deep blues and purples, and the first stars appeared, silent witnesses to the town's collective pause. The people, accustomed to this pattern, found comfort in the predictability of administration's hours. They knew that government would resume its work with the sunrise. Taxes, legal matters, and civic decisions could wait until morning. This alignment of institutional rhythm with natural cycles reduced anxiety and created a sense of shared temporal order. Citizens could rest, confident that affairs were in capable hands and that nothing required immediate intervention after dark. Even the documents themselves seemed to rest alongside the people. Ledgers, letters, and official papers sat neatly on desks or shelves, quiet and undisturbed. Ink dried and settled, pages remained open only when work would continue the next day. There was no hurry, no immediate pressure. The physical stillness of records mirrored the mental calm of townsfolk, allowing everyone to transition into the slower, restorative pace of evening. In homes, evenings unfolded with deliberate leisure. Candlelight illuminated tasks that were gentle and meditative, mending clothes, preparing food, or reading letters. Children learned patience, watching their parents move methodically through household work. Conversations were soft, voices gentle, and laughter calm. The knowledge that government had paused its work allowed families to relax without concern for civic obligations. The day's responsibilities were accounted for. Now, attention could shift fully to domestic life and personal reflection. The slow administration of government also shaped expectations. Citizens understood the natural limitations of bureaucracy. Documents took time to be processed, decisions required deliberation, and tasks would resume with the next sunrise. This awareness encouraged patience, a calm acceptance of delay, and a gentle rhythm of waiting. Even legal matters, which might seem urgent, were handled according to the day's pace. Nightfall was a time when all urgent concerns were suspended, a collective pause in the life of both government and community. Even outside town centers, the alignment of public and private rhythms created harmony. Farmhands ended their work, livestock were secured, and villagers prepared for rest. The quiet of streets, fields, and rivers reflected the stillness of administrative offices. In this shared pause, the town seemed to breathe as one, a single organism moving with the cycles of the sun and the natural world. Nightfall was both literal and symbolic, a time when work ceased, reflections deepened, and calm was restored. Letters and correspondence, central to governance, also adapted to this rhythm. Mail was collected, sorted, and logged during daylight hours. At night, letters rested in offices, their journey paused until morning. Citizens learned to anticipate arrival times, to wait patiently for responses, and to trust that their messages would be handled according to established procedures. The absence of immediate communication reinforced the pace of rest, allowing minds to disengage from worry and anticipation. Even in more bustling towns, where administrative work continued into the later hours, the fundamental pattern remained. Clerks and officials adjusted their activity to daylight, often leaving evenings for planning, reflection, or quiet completion of unfinished tasks. Night was preserved as a time of calm, a universal acknowledgement that both human and institutional life needed periods of rest. This practice reinforced social stability and fostered mental ease among those reliant on government for daily functions. The alignment of civic rhythm with natural cycles also allowed for reflection and planning. Clerks could review the day's work, correct small errors, and prepare for the next day. Citizens could think through pending tasks, family obligations, or community needs, knowing that administrative work would resume in the morning. The predictable suspension of activity allowed both mental and physical energy to be conserved, creating a balance between duty and rest.
Even mundane routines were shaped by this rhythm. Taxes were collected, property records updated, and official correspondence managed in a slow, deliberate manner. Clerks organized papers methodically, leaving nothing in disarray. Every task, though seemingly small, contributed to a sense of continuity and order that extended into the night. The stillness of offices reflected the mental calm of the community, reinforcing the shared pause of daily life. As darkness deepened, the town became quiet and introspective. Fires crackled softly in homes, candles flickered, and shadows moved gently across walls. The absence of civic activity was not a void, but a space for calm reflection. People engaged in quiet tasks, shared stories, or simply rested. Sleep became easier because the world outside had slowed. The cessation of government activity reinforced the natural cycle of day and night, creating a collective sense of reassurance. Nightfall in the age of slow administration was more than a practical pause. It was a shared experience, a rhythm that tied together individual lives, civic duty, and the natural environment. Citizens and government alike rested simultaneously, a synchronized interlude that preserved both productivity and mental calm. In this slow, deliberate society, evening was a time of quiet, restorative balance, a period when obligations were suspended and life could be experienced fully without concern for interruption. Even the architecture of administrative buildings reflected this rhythm. Large windows allowed daylight to illuminate workspaces. Shutters were closed at night to secure offices. Desks and shelves were organized for orderly resumption the next day. The physical environment supported the pace of work and the subsequent pause, reinforcing both practical and psychological rest. Clerks, citizens, and officials alike understood that nightfall was a collective signal to pause, to reflect, and to recharge. To imagine life in this period is to imagine patience, alignment, and shared stillness. Picture the sun dipping low, offices quiet, streets emptying, and homes bathed in warm, fading light. Clerks close ledgers, officials extinguish candles, and families settle by firesides. The world slows in unison, government sleeps alongside its people, and night becomes a sanctuary of calm. The predictable suspension of civic activity allows reflection, peace, and mental restoration, a gentle, enduring rhythm that shapes the life of the community. In early America, the slow pace of administration did more than preserve accuracy and order. It cultivated calm, patience, and trust. Nightfall was sacred, a period when work ceased, reflection deepened, and the shared rhythm of human and institutional life brought reassurance. Citizens rested without worry, knowing that the machinery of governance would resume in the morning. This alignment of human activity, civic function, and natural cycles created a gentle, restorative balance, allowing life to unfold deliberately and predictably. And so, in the age of slow administration, evenings were quiet, deliberate, and calming. Government rested alongside its people, offices were still, and the natural world guided the pace of life. Nightfall offered both literal and symbolic respite,
a pause for reflection, a chance to restore energy, and a gentle alignment of civic and personal rhythm. In this era, the world slowed in harmony, and the shared pause of night allowed minds and bodies to rest, recover, and prepare for the measured unfolding of the next day. A gentle portrait of daily fatigue earned through quiet, focused labor. In early America, the rhythm of daily life was defined by effort, repetition, and a slow, deliberate pace. Labor was both physical and mental, requiring attention, care, and patience. Among the quietest yet most constant forms of work was the act of writing, recording, and managing the myriad tasks of towns, farms, and households. Those who worked with quills, ink, and paper earned their fatigue through focused, attentive labor, a fatigue that came gently, without haste or stress, and that guided them toward early, restful bedtimes. Imagine a small study in a colonial home. A wooden desk is set near the window, bathed in the morning light. A clerk sits upright, quill in hand, inkpot nearby. Before him lie sheets of parchment and a ledger filled with neat columns of names, numbers, and dates. Each stroke of the quill is deliberate, forming letters carefully, aligning numbers precisely, and ensuring that every record is accurate. The scratching of pen on paper is soft, steady, and almost hypnotic, a gentle accompaniment to the measured breathing of the clerk. Ink-stained hands are a mark of diligence. A few drops of ink may have escaped onto fingers or palms during the day, a visible reminder of hours spent in focused attention. Each blot, each smudge, tells the story of patient work, records checked, letters copied, accounts balanced. Fatigue is earned not through frantic activity, but through steady concentration, through the quiet accumulation of effort across the hours. Hands that bear ink stains are hands that have labored thoughtfully, carefully, and with purpose. Daily work in early America began with the sunrise. Farmers tended their fields, livestock were fed, and households began the tasks that defined domestic life. Clerks and record keepers started their duties by preparing ink, trimming quills, and reviewing the previous day's entries. Each day followed a gentle rhythm, punctuated by breaks for meals, small chores, and occasional conversation. The pace was deliberate, shaped by natural light, available materials, and the limits of human endurance. As the day unfolded, the clerk's attention remained steady. Each entry in a ledger, each note in a household account, each copied letter required focus. Mistakes were corrected thoughtfully, columns realigned, and calculations double-checked. There was no rush, only the slow progression of careful work. In this repetition, the mind became calm, absorbed in the rhythm of deliberate action. Fatigue built gradually, a soft weight that mirrored the day's labor and signaled the body's readiness for rest. Early bedtimes were a natural consequence of such labor. As the sun descended, offices, homes, and workshops gradually quieted. Lamps and candles were lit for the last tasks of the day, their gentle glow illuminating inked pages and polished surfaces. Clerks finished their entries, farmers closed barns, and families prepared for the evening meal. The physical exertion of the day, combined with the steady focus of mental work, guided everyone toward rest. Fatigue was welcomed, a sign of effort well expended, a gentle reminder that the body and mind needed the restorative embrace of sleep. The daily rhythm of labor and rest was reinforced by the absence of artificial interruptions. There were no ringing phones, no flashing notifications, no pressure to continue work after daylight faded. The day's responsibilities were concluded according to natural cycles. When light diminished, work slowed. Evening became a time of reflection, simple domestic chores, and quiet preparation for sleep. The pace of life encouraged both productivity and calm, a balance that nurtured body and mind alike. In families, the evening unfolded with shared activities that were both practical and restorative. Meals were prepared slowly, with care and attention. Children completed simple tasks under the watchful eyes of parents. Conversation was soft, laughter gentle, and stories were shared without haste. The day's work, whether in the fields, the home, or at a desk, found closure in communal routines. Early bedtimes were not imposed but welcomed, a natural alignment with the body's needs and the rhythm of life. Even in town offices, the pace of work contributed to fatigue in a gentle, controlled way. Clerks moved between desks, updating records, processing correspondence, and preparing for the next day. Each task was approached with deliberate care. Mistakes were corrected thoughtfully, paper was stacked neatly, ledgers were closed and stored. By the end of the day, both body and mind were prepared for rest, the slow accumulation of effort creating a weight that invited sleep rather than resisted it. Letters and correspondence, central to early administration, reinforced this rhythm. Each letter required preparation, ink, quill, careful phrasing, and neat folding. Sending a message was a mindful act, not a hurried one. When the day ended, letters rested until they could continue their journey, and the sender, having completed the task with care, allowed the mind to release its attention. The slow, deliberate nature of communication contributed to a natural fatigue, a readiness for early rest. The physicality of ink-stained labor cannot be overlooked. Trimming quills, dipping pens into ink, and turning heavy ledgers engaged the body in subtle ways. The act of maintaining precise handwriting over hours required posture, movement, and focus. Hands and eyes grew tired, shoulders ached slightly, and the rhythm of writing contributed to a deep sense of effort accomplished. Fatigue was earned through repetition and care, a tangible proof of work done well. Even small errors in writing or record-keeping taught patience and reinforced the gentle accumulation of fatigue. Clerks corrected mistakes slowly, blotting ink or scraping parchment, ensuring accuracy. Farmers adjusted fences or repaired tools carefully. Families reviewed household accounts or prepared meals with deliberate attention. Each minor correction, each repetitive task, contributed to a measured rhythm of labor that ended naturally in rest. Fatigue was gentle because it was earned slowly in a series of thoughtful actions rather than bursts of frantic activity. Evening light and candlelight further shaped this routine. As shadows lengthened, the body naturally prepared for rest. Eyes and hands that had worked steadily throughout the day began to tire. The quiet sounds of the household, footsteps on wooden floors, the soft rustle of papers, the gentle crackle of the hearth signaled the close of activity. Sleep in this environment was both necessary and anticipated. Fatigue was welcomed as a companion, a sign of effort applied with care, a gentle transition from labor to rest. In this era, early bedtimes were not a restriction, but a natural consequence of the day's work. The absence of artificial light and the steady pace of labor encouraged the body to follow its natural rhythms. Children and adults alike learned to rise with the sun and rest with its setting. The quiet fatigue of deliberate effort became a soothing guide, leading minds and bodies toward restorative sleep. The satisfaction of work well done, visible in ink-stained hands and neatly closed ledgers, contributed to mental calm. There was a tangible sense of accomplishment, a proof of effort that the day had been spent purposefully. Fatigue was not frustrating or stressful, it was gentle, natural, and deserved. It reinforced the harmony of life, the alignment of work with the body's needs, and the beauty of measured effort. By nightfall, homes and offices were quiet. Ink-stained hands rested, ledgers were closed, and candles extinguished. The world slowed, reflecting the natural rhythm of day and night. Sleep came easily, guided by the gentle weight of labor, the satisfaction of attention applied carefully, and the quiet assurance that the day's work had been completed with thoughtfulness. Early bedtimes were embraced, not enforced, a natural alignment with effort, rhythm, and rest. To imagine life in this period is to imagine patience, attention, and gentle fatigue. Picture the clerk putting aside the quill, the farmer securing livestock, the family preparing for sleep. The weight of the day, earned through focused labor, signals rest. Ink-stained hands are proof of diligence, closed ledgers are evidence of careful effort. Fatigue is gentle, earned, and restorative, guiding minds and bodies toward calm, early sleep. And so, in early America, daily life cultivated a natural rhythm. Quiet, focused labor, whether in homes, offices, or fields, produced a gentle fatigue that encouraged early bedtimes. Effort was deliberate. Deliberate work nurtured patience, and the slow accumulation of labor aligned with the cycles of day and night. Ink-stained hands, tired shoulders, and weary eyes were not signs of hardship, but markers of life lived attentively. In this rhythm, sleep became a natural reward, a restoration earned through measured, thoughtful, and quiet effort. In early America, daily life moved with a quiet rhythm that seems almost unimaginable today. There were no phones ringing at odd hours, no urgent messages pinging constantly, no alarms demanding immediate attention. The workings of government and administration reflected this same calm. Bureaucracy existed, of course, but it was deliberate, methodical, and uninterrupted by modern intrusions. People's days and nights followed natural cycles, with work and responsibility paused as evening fell. Sleep was undisturbed, supported by the predictable rhythm of life itself. Imagine a small colonial town. The post office, town hall, and courthouse sit quietly along the main street, their wooden doors closed for the day. Inside, clerks have long since put away quills and ink, ledgers are stacked neatly on shelves, and correspondence rests untouched until morning. There are no bells, no alarms, no urgent summons. Everything waits its turn. The machinery of governance functions on patience, not pressure. And this absence of interruption creates a world in which rest is possible and evenings are unhurried. During the day, government work was deliberate. Clerks recorded transactions, maintained tax rolls, and documented property deeds. Officials presided over local courts, resolving disputes in orderly sessions. Letters were copied carefully, inventories updated methodically, and every detail double-checked. Work required attention, focus, and time, but it was always limited to the natural hours of daylight. There was no expectation of rapid response, no system that demanded constant vigilance. This absence of interruption extended beyond government offices into homes and workplaces. Families carried out daily tasks, cooking, cleaning, tending livestock, preparing fields, with deliberate attention. Merchants maintained inventories and accounts with care. Clerks balanced ledgers and copied letters. But all work paused naturally when the sun set. The day had a natural endpoint. Nighttime was a sanctuary, free from intrusion, free from the constant urgency that modern systems impose. Letters and official correspondence exemplify this calm. Messages moved slowly between towns and colonies. A letter sent from one village to another could take days or even weeks to arrive, carried by horseback, wagon, or boat. The delay, though frustrating by modern standards, was also a gift. It meant that neither sender nor recipient felt pressured to respond immediately. There were no notifications, no alerts, no urgent reminders buzzing insistently. This slow pace allowed the mind to rest and focus on the present, rather than being constantly pulled toward obligations elsewhere. Even routine tasks within government offices were designed with natural rhythms in mind. Clerks filed documents, logged transactions, and reviewed correspondence during daylight hours. The pace was deliberate, with pauses for meals and reflection. Mistakes were corrected slowly, numbers recalculated carefully, and records cross-checked against prior entries. This thoughtful approach ensured accuracy while also preserving mental calm. There was no chaos, no sense of urgency, only the steady rhythm of measured work. In households, the absence of alarms and interruptions supported restorative sleep. Families rose with the sun, attended to chores, and retired when evening fell. The natural timing of day and night guided activity, and this alignment of human and environmental rhythms fostered a gentle, unbroken sleep. Without the constant reminders and notifications that plague modern life, the mind could settle fully at night, free to process the day and rest deeply. The predictable nature of bureaucratic work reinforced this calm. Citizens knew that documents would be processed in order, that records would be updated during working hours, and that no urgent interruptions would disrupt the night. Legal matters, tax assessments, and correspondence followed a schedule dictated by daylight and natural limits, rather than by artificial alarms. Knowing that everything had its proper place and time allowed people to disengage from worry as darkness approached. Even in larger towns or early cities, this pattern held. Government offices operated efficiently but never intrusively. Clerks and officials paced themselves according to daylight and available resources. Tasks were prioritized carefully, ensuring that nothing was left incomplete, yet evenings remained free from disruption. The world outside moved at a similar pace. Merchants closed shops, farmers secured livestock, and families gathered to eat, converse, and rest. Nighttime became a universally respected period of stillness. The tactile nature of work reinforced the absence of intrusion. Quills, ink, and paper demanded attention, but they moved slowly, naturally. Each stroke required focus. Each page required care. Clerks were fully engaged during the day, yet the effort ended when daylight waned. This deliberate separation of work and rest created a rhythm that modern digital systems rarely allow. Fatigue accumulated naturally, not through constant alerts, but through thoughtful engagement with meaningful tasks. Even communication followed gentle patterns. Mail was logged and sorted during office hours, and the sender and recipient both accepted the pace of transit. Weeks of waiting for replies were standard, not stressful. Absence of immediacy created space for reflection, planning, and relaxation. Letters were read carefully, reread, and pondered. The slow exchange of messages gave time for mental processing, emotional reflection, and preparation for action the following day. There was no panic, no urgency, only the gentle unfolding of correspondence across time and space. This slower, more deliberate bureaucracy influenced the wider culture. People became accustomed to working and thinking within natural limits. Expectations were calibrated to daylight, to human endurance, and to practical constraints. As a result, anxiety was lower. Mental energy was preserved, and evenings were free for rest and reflection. The absence of interruptions created continuity of thought and calm, fostering a lifestyle in which sleep was not interrupted and nights were unhurried. Even civic routines, such as court sessions or tax collection, respected these natural limits. Citizens attended to obligations during daylight, resolving disputes, paying debts, and completing paperwork in orderly sessions. Once the sun set, the offices emptied, the streets quieted, and life transitioned to domestic routines. No alarms summoned attention after hours, no messages demanded immediate action. The world slowed in unison, reinforcing mental calm and physical rest. Children and young adults learned these rhythms from observation. They saw adults engage fully in work during daylight hours, then retire naturally at night. There were no night calls, no unexpected summons, no pressure to continue labor when darkness fell. Sleep was protected by the absence of interruption. Minds rested deeply, bodies recovered fully, and the cycle of work and rest became internalized as a natural rhythm. Even personal work, such as bookkeeping, letter writing, or domestic organization, adhered to these patterns. Tasks were completed during daylight, with evenings reserved for quiet reflection or rest. Any unfinished work was left in order, ready for the following day. The predictable pause between work and night allowed the mind to disengage, processing the day's efforts without intrusion. Sleep was supported by the gentle rhythm of human activity and natural limits on administrative and personal obligations. In this way, early American life created a balance that modern systems often disrupt. Bureaucracy existed, but it respected human limits. Offices closed, correspondence waited, and work concluded with the sunset. Even in times of urgency, the pace was deliberate rather than frantic. The absence of bells, alarms, and constant notifications allowed evenings to remain uninterrupted, nights to be calm, and sleep to come naturally. To imagine life in this era is to imagine a world in which work and rest coexisted in harmony. Picture the clerk closing a ledger as sunlight fades, the farmer securing livestock, the family gathering quietly around the hearth. The streets are empty, offices are still, and correspondence rests untouched. The mind, unpressured by urgent messages, can relax. The body, freed from artificial alarms, can prepare for deep sleep. Nightfall is complete, uninterrupted, and restorative. Bureaucracy without bells or alarms is more than a historical curiosity. It is a reminder of the human need for rhythm, for unbroken rest, and for predictable cycles of work and pause. The deliberate pace of administration, aligned with daylight and natural limits, allowed early Americans to work diligently without sacrificing mental calm. Even in busy towns, offices, and homes, evenings remained a sanctuary, a protected time for reflection, family, and sleep. And so, in early America, nights were calm, sleep was undisturbed, and life followed a rhythm shaped by the slow, deliberate workings of bureaucracy. No bells rang in the dark, no alarms demanded attention, no interruptions shattered the mind's rest. The slow, careful cadence of government and personal labor created an environment in which sleep was natural, evenings were restorative, and life unfolded gently, predictably, and without pressure. Why clearly written laws reduced nighttime worry and speculation? In early America, life was filled with uncertainties. Crops could fail, rivers might flood, disputes could arise, and news traveled slowly. Yet, amid this unpredictability, there was one quiet stabilizer: written laws. The careful recording of rules and regulations, available to citizens and officials alike, created a sense of calm authority that extended beyond the courthouse and into daily life. Knowing what was expected, what was prohibited, and what would be upheld offered reassurance that eased the mind, even as night approached. Imagine a small colonial town. The courthouse stands at the center of the main street, its wooden doors closed for the evening. Inside, rows of neatly stacked books and ledgers hold the laws, ordinances, and court decisions that guide the town. Clerks have copied statutes carefully, judges have recorded rulings meticulously, and all records are organized so that they can be referenced when needed. These documents, silent yet commanding, provide a framework for daily life, offering clarity where uncertainty might otherwise prevail. Written rules worked quietly but powerfully. A landowner consulting the property laws could be confident that boundaries, taxes, and rights were documented. A merchant reviewing trade regulations knew which practices were acceptable. Families looking after household or labor matters could consult ordinances and understand their responsibilities. This clarity reduced speculation, minimized disputes, and created a sense of order that extended into evening hours when worries often crept in. The physical presence of laws contributed to their calming effect. Open ledgers, neatly written pages, and carefully bound tomes reminded citizens that governance was structured and predictable. Inked lines on parchment carried authority without noise, without demand, and without urgency. Unlike modern alerts or notifications, the written law waited patiently on shelves, offering reassurance without intrusion. Knowing that guidance existed and could be referenced when necessary allowed minds to release worry, to rest, and to approach sleep without lingering fear of the unknown. Daily life reflected this calm authority. Disputes over property, trade, or obligations were addressed according to clearly recorded rules. Citizens learned to rely on precedents, trusting that decisions would be consistent and fair. There was no need for speculation about arbitrary outcomes. The written law provided a predictable framework that shaped behavior and expectation. Families, merchants, and farmers could plan, act, and rest with confidence, secure in the knowledge that rules were known, visible, and stable. Clerks and record keepers played a vital role in this system. Each law or ordinance was transcribed carefully, often in multiple copies. Mistakes were corrected deliberately, and entries were cross-referenced to ensure accuracy. The slow, methodical nature of this work reinforced the authority of the law. Every line, every heading, every margin note conveyed care, precision, and permanence. Citizens could see that rules were not arbitrary, but thoughtfully maintained, giving their words a weight that quieted speculation and eased minds. The rhythm of lawmaking and enforcement itself contributed to calm. Courts held sessions during daylight, decisions were recorded and made available, and communication of new statutes followed a measured pace. People understood the cadence of governance. There were times for attention and times for rest. Evening hours were preserved for reflection, domestic routines, and sleep. Knowing that the machinery of justice rested alongside them, citizens could release daytime concerns, confident that decisions would be accessible and consistent when needed. Even households benefited from this clarity. Parents teaching children about behavior, chores, and responsibilities could reference rules known to all. Farmers consulting tax regulations or land ordinances could plan labor and resources accordingly. Merchants following trade guidelines could operate without fear of arbitrary interference. The calm authority of written rules created a backdrop of predictability that influenced not only compliance, but mental peace. Uncertainty and speculation, often the sources of anxiety, were minimized. Letters and correspondence, too, reinforced the clarity of law. Towns and communities communicated ordinances, court decisions, and administrative rules in writing. Citizens received information with enough time to act thoughtfully, not urgently. Weeks of waiting for messages, as slow as it might seem today, allowed reflection and mental calm. The predictability of when and how information arrived mirrored the certainty of written rules, further easing nighttime worries. The presence of written law also shaped thought. People knew that there was a standard to follow, a guide to behavior, and a method to resolve disputes. Rumors and guesswork were unnecessary because authoritative guidance was available. This reduced mental agitation. Evening hours could be spent in reflection, domestic tasks, or quiet conversation rather than fretting over possible outcomes or imagining scenarios that might never come to pass. The law, calm and silent, provided a buffer against anxiety. In towns and villages, the predictability of rules extended beyond individual households. Community life was regulated by ordinances that everyone could reference. Market practices, property boundaries, and civic duties were standardized. Knowing that neighbors, officials, and authorities operated according to the same set of rules reinforced trust. Social cohesion was strengthened, and individuals could rest assured that life's uncertainties were managed within a structured framework. The physical act of consulting the law contributed to mental calm. Opening a ledger, reading carefully written statutes, and making notes provided a sense of control. Citizens could prepare, plan, and understand their obligations. This process was slow and deliberate, emphasizing reflection over haste. Evening reading of laws, whether for personal, familial, or professional guidance, became a gentle, calming activity that aligned with the natural rhythm of day and night. Even the act of recording new laws was careful and measured. Legislators, clerks, and judges took time to draft, review, and approve each statute. Decisions were not rushed. Deliberation ensured accuracy and fairness. This deliberate pace reinforced confidence in the system. Citizens could trust that laws were thoughtfully enacted and reliably maintained. Evening brought no sudden changes, no urgent announcements. Instead, it offered predictable calm, supported by the measured authority of written rules. The authority of laws extended into personal conduct. Families, merchants, and communities internalized rules and norms. Knowing the standards reduced mental strain and encouraged a measured approach to decision-making. Fear of arbitrary punishment, of unexpected disruption, or of social discord was diminished. The stability of written rules allowed people to release daytime anxieties and approach evening with ease. In this way, written rules created a subtle but powerful sleep aid. Mental unrest, often fueled by uncertainty, was reduced. Reflection replaced speculation, preparation replaced worry, and evenings were free for restorative rest. The law, though silent and inanimate, exercised a gentle authority that regulated not only society, but the rhythms of thought, emotion, and sleep. To imagine life in this period is to imagine confidence grounded in clarity. Picture a family gathering after the day's work, a merchant reviewing trade practices, a farmer checking land records. Each individual can rely on the calm authority of written rules, secure in the knowledge that obligations are defined and outcomes predictable. Minds, freed from speculation, settle gently. Sleep arrives naturally, untroubled by uncertainty or fear. And so, in early America, the written law was more than governance. It was a source of mental tranquility. Its clear, deliberate presence reduced speculation, regulated behavior, and supported the natural rhythms of life. As evening fell and the world grew quiet, the calm authority of written rules allowed minds to rest, hearts to feel secure, and sleep to come easily. A gentle testament to the power of clarity, structure, and deliberate order in a world of uncertainty.
How shared rhythms of work and rest emerged naturally. In early America, life unfolded with a rhythm that modern society often forgets. The day began with the sunrise, work followed steadily, and the evening brought a natural pause. Sleep was not merely a biological necessity, it was part of a social agreement, unwritten yet universally understood. Communities, families, and individuals fell into a shared rhythm of labor and rest, guided by daylight, physical exertion, and the predictability of daily life. Night was a time of quiet, restorative alignment, supported by the unspoken consensus that work would pause and sleep would follow. Picture a small colonial village at dawn. The sky is tinged with soft pinks and golds, smoke rises gently from chimneys, and the first horses begin to stir in stables. Farmers rise to tend their fields, milk the cows, and gather eggs. Merchants prepare their shops, laying out goods and checking ledgers. Clerks at the town office dip quills in ink, ready to record transactions, document correspondence, and update accounts. Everyone knows the day has a beginning, a course, and an end. Work is methodical, deliberate, and bounded by natural light. This structure allowed sleep to emerge naturally as the day's work concluded. Even without artificial alarms or clocks, individuals internalized the rhythm of daylight. As the sun traveled across the sky, activity waxed and waned. Tasks were completed in stages, meals were taken at predictable times, and responsibilities were fulfilled gradually. By evening, the body and mind were ready for rest. Fatigue arrived gently, earned through the deliberate exertion of labor, and the entire community slowed in synchrony. The unspoken agreement about rest extended to households. Parents guided children in daily chores, observing their own routines in parallel. Meals were shared, chores completed, and evenings were spent in quiet conversation, mending, or simple entertainment. Windows were closed, fires banked, and families retreated to the warmth and safety of their homes. Sleep was a communal expectation, and its timing required no enforcement. Everyone understood that the day had ended and rest was due. Even townsfolk who worked in offices or engaged in clerical labor experienced this rhythm. Clerks and record keepers maintained ledgers, documented correspondence, and transcribed laws with care throughout the day. The physical and mental exertion of concentrated work gradually led to natural fatigue. As evening fell, desks were cleared, inkpots closed, and quills rested. There was no hurry, no intrusion, no demand to continue after daylight faded.
The day concluded as a matter of course, and sleep followed as the natural reward of labor accomplished. Shared rhythms of rest were reinforced by the slow pace of society. Letters traveled at a measured speed, legal matters were resolved methodically, and trade moved according to predictable patterns. No urgent messages disrupted evenings. Even farmers and merchants accepted the rhythm of nature. Crops could not be hurried, livestock could not be rushed, and deliveries required patience. This unhurried pace created a collective understanding. Work has its time, and so does rest. The community synchronized, not through explicit coordination, but through shared adherence to the natural order of day and night. In rural areas, the cadence of work and rest was particularly pronounced. Farmers' tasks followed the sun. Fields were plowed and planted during daylight, animals tended at regular intervals, and household chores were completed with attention to detail. By sunset, the day's work had naturally concluded. The quiet of the evening signaled that sleep was imminent. Without bells, alarms, or modern distractions, people moved gently toward bed, guided by physical fatigue, the fading light, and the unspoken expectation of rest. The calm authority of routine supported this agreement. Even civic life conformed. Town halls, post offices, and courts operated according to the hours of the day. Clerks recorded transactions, officials processed correspondence, and judges presided over matters within predictable schedules. After work was complete, offices were closed, streets emptied, shops were shuttered, and citizens retreated to their homes. Night belonged to rest. Sleep was a communal expectation, and the unspoken understanding was universal. No work would interrupt the stillness of the evening. This rhythm also reduced anxiety and speculation. Knowing that work and civic activity would pause created mental space for relaxation. Citizens could trust that documents would be processed, decisions would be made, and correspondence would continue the following day. There was no urgency to act at night, no pressure from external forces, and no alarms to disrupt attention. Minds could disengage from daily responsibilities, settle, and prepare for restorative sleep. The unspoken agreement of shared rest allowed both body and mind to align with natural rhythms. Families contributed to this understanding as well. Children observed adults completing tasks, shutting shops, and preparing for evening. By internalizing these patterns, they learned the timing of rest. Bedtime was not imposed, it emerged naturally from the shared rhythm of life. The predictability of this system, reinforced by observation and experience, ensured that rest was not interrupted, anxiety was minimized, and sleep became a stable, reliable part of daily life.
A slow, reflective conclusion connecting early bureaucracy to peaceful sleep. In early America, life was measured by the sun, the seasons, and the deliberate rhythms of daily labor. Among the quiet yet essential patterns that shaped this life was bureaucracy, the orderly management of records, correspondence, and civic duties. Unlike the urgent, fast-paced systems of today, early administrative work moved slowly, carefully, and predictably. Clerks recorded information by hand, ledgers were meticulously maintained, and letters took days or weeks to traverse towns and colonies. In this deliberate rhythm, there emerged a simple truth. When paper rested, so did the nation. Picture a small town as the sun begins to set. The courthouse stands quietly at the center of the main street, shutters drawn against the fading light. Inside, quills are laid down beside ink pots, ledgers are closed, and documents, carefully written over the course of the day, sit undisturbed on polished shelves. Outside, families finish their evening chores, gather for meals, and prepare for the night. The streets empty, shops are shuttered, and the gentle hush of evening settles over the town. There is a harmony in this pause, a rhythm that aligns human activity with the natural world and ensures that the day's labors do not extend into the night. Administrative work, in its deliberate pace, demanded patience and focus.
Clerks copied laws, recorded transactions, and maintained records with care. Mistakes were corrected slowly, calculations were double-checked, and correspondence was copied carefully before being dispatched. Each task required attention, and each task required time. This slow progression reinforced order and accuracy, and it also created a natural boundary. When daylight waned, work concluded, papers rested, and with them, the people who managed them. The predictable cessation of bureaucratic activity had a quiet effect on the broader population. Farmers and merchants, families and townsfolk understood that civic duties and governmental decisions would continue in the morning. There was no urgency to act after sunset, no interruptions demanding attention. Letters and documents waited patiently for processing, and in this waiting, citizens found reassurance. The slow rhythm of government mirrored the natural cycles of day and night, creating a framework in which both the body and mind could rest. In homes, evenings were calm and restorative. Children learned by observing adults, clerks putting away ledgers, farmers securing livestock, families finishing chores with care. Meals were prepared thoughtfully, tasks concluded methodically, and the household settled into quiet routines. Candles and hearth fires provided gentle light, sufficient for the last small activities of the day, then were banked and extinguished. There were no alarms, no flashing signals, no urgent demands to break the rhythm of night. Fatigue, earned through steady effort, guided individuals naturally towards rest. Even in towns with more complex civic structures, this pattern persisted. Post office closed its doors, courthouses emptied, and offices grew silent. Letters and documents waited for the next day, a deliberate pause built into the rhythm of governance. Citizens internalized this pattern, understanding that work had its time and rest had its own. The unbroken calm of the evening was both a social agreement and a natural consequence of the slow, careful pace of bureaucracy. The physicality of paper and pen played a part in this rhythm. Quills required dipping, ink needed time to dry, and ledgers had to be handled with care. Clerks' hands became ink-stained, fingers tired from careful repetition. Mistakes were erased or corrected with deliberate attention, reinforcing patience. These tactile experiences tied effort directly to time and attention, ensuring that work could not be rushed beyond human limits. And when the day concluded, hands rested, ledgers rested, and the rhythm of life moved seamlessly into night. Even correspondence contributed to peaceful nights. Letters were carefully written, addressed, and dispatched with the understanding that they would arrive slowly in their own time. Recipients, in turn, anticipated arrival with patience. There was no urgency, no expectation of immediate response, no buzzing reminders to disturb the quiet of evening. The slow pace allowed reflection, considered response, and mental calm. Citizens could release the day's concerns and transition gently into rest. Courthouse routines offer another example. Judges held court during daylight hours, witnesses testified, and records were carefully maintained. Once the day concluded, proceedings paused. Clerks filed documents, ledgers were closed, and rooms emptied. The town outside mirrored this calm. Streets quieted, homes darkened, and the collective pause of civic life reinforced the natural cycle of work and rest. There were no unexpected summonses, no urgent calls. The day was complete, and sleep could arrive unimpeded.
The psychological effect of this predictable pause was profound. People knew that work, decisions, and correspondence would continue in order, according to established patterns. There was no pressure to anticipate outcomes, no stress over sudden obligations. Minds could settle, hearts could rest, and the body could follow its natural rhythm. The deliberate pace of bureaucracy, often invisible and unremarkable in daily life,
became a foundation for collective tranquility. Even the smallest tasks were part of this harmony. Clerks balanced accounts with care, farmers inspected fences slowly, and households completed chores deliberately. Each completed task contributed to a sense of order, while the absence of urgent interruptions preserved the quiet of evening. In this way, life, labor, and civic structure worked together to foster rest, a pause that was both literal and symbolic. When paper rested, so did the nation. The slow, reflective nature of early administration encouraged patience and mental calm. Mistakes were corrected thoughtfully, letters read carefully, and records maintained with attention. Citizens could trust that the machinery of governance was deliberate and fair. Evening was not a time for anxiety or speculation. It was a time for reflection, conversation, and quiet preparation for sleep. The predictable pause of bureaucracy mirrored the natural pause of the sun, reinforcing the rhythm of day and night. Even in bustling towns with busy markets, the principle remained. Civic offices and households alike respected the natural limits of human activity. Clerks, merchants, and farmers alike knew when to conclude, when to pause, and when to let papers rest. The predictable conclusion of work created a collective calm, a sense that the day had been properly concluded and that sleep was both earned and expected. To imagine life in this era is to imagine a world of gentle rhythms. Picture clerks closing ledgers, families extinguishing fires, merchants securing goods, and streets quieting as the sun sinks low. Papers rest, hands rest, and the mind follows suit. The collective pause is reflected in the slow, deliberate movements of every person, in the careful placement of every document, and in the predictable silence of evening. Rest is a shared experience, a natural alignment of labor and sleep. Letters, ledgers, and laws, silent and still, serve as both evidence and agents of this rhythm. Their careful organization and predictable pace create a sense of stability that allows minds to relax. Citizens could leave their work behind without fear, knowing that the machinery of governance would resume in order with the next sunrise. The unhurried pace of administration supports both social order and personal tranquility. And so, in early America, evenings were calm because the day's work had been methodical, deliberate, and completed. Papers rested, clerks rested, families rested, and with them, the nation itself rested. Sleep was not a luxury or a hurried necessity, but a natural continuation of the day's rhythm. The slow, reflective pace of bureaucracy allowed human activity to align with natural cycles, offering reassurance, stability, and restorative calm. When paper rested, so did the nation. Ledgers closed, correspondence paused, laws were recorded, and citizens slept. Night was uninterrupted, deliberate, and restorative. The calm authority of paperwork, the steady hand of the clerk, and the predictable patterns of civic life converged to create evenings that were peaceful and untroubled. In this deliberate, measured society, sleep arrived naturally, minds relaxed, and the world momentarily stood still. In the silence of night, one could almost hear the gentle echo of quills on parchment, the whispered rustle of paper settling, the quiet assurance that the day's labor was complete. It was a rhythm older than clocks, older than urgency, rooted in care, order, and patience. And as the nation rested alongside its ledgers and letters, sleep came gently, deeply, and uninterrupted.